It's funny. Every time I see that footage, those videos of Iron Dome doing its thing, intercepting those rockets? I mean, it's captivating, isn't it? It's like something you'd see in a movie, these streaks of light, explosions way up high. And the more I learn about how it all works, the more interesting it gets.
Yeah, it really is an incredible system. It's no wonder people all over the world are, paying attention to Iron Dome. I mean, it's this highly advanced mobile system, and it's purpose-built for a very specific and, let's be honest, very crucial job.
That's right. It's all about protection, right?
Yeah.
Protecting against short-range rockets, artillery fire, threats that, I don't know, maybe seem smaller scale compared to some, but we all know the impact is huge.
You're absolutely right, and that's really what makes Iron Dome stand out. It's different from those big missile defense systems we hear about all the time. Those are designed for those long-range missiles that travel massive distances. With Iron Dome, it's about being precise, about reacting quickly to a very immediate threat.
So if those larger systems are like, I don't know, a sledgehammer, Iron Dome is more like a scalpel.
That's a great way to put it. It's a specialized tool for a very specific job.
I like that. So let's dive into how this tool actually works, because we've got these articles here talking about radar and command centers and missiles. Seems like a lot going on.
Oh, there's definitely a lot to it, but the core of how it works is actually pretty straightforward. Basically, Iron Dome is a three-part system, and each part has a really important role. First up, you've got the radar system, which is constantly scanning, always on the lookout for any launches that might be a problem.
Okay, so the radar is like the eyes of the system, constantly watching.
Exactly. And once the radar picks something up, it sends all that information to the command center. Think of the command center as the brain, because this is where the system processes everything in real time. Calculating trajectories, figuring out if it's actually a threat, and then deciding what to do.
So it's not just about shooting down everything that's launched. There's actual decision-making happening based on the data.
Yeah. That's exactly it. The command center is weighing all these different factors. What path is the threat on? Where might it hit? Are there a lot of people in the area? The system prioritizes the threats that are the most dangerous to people, civilians and important buildings and all that. And then if they decide it needs to be taken out, that's where the third part comes in, the Tamir missiles.
And that's when we get to those movie-like interceptions, right? What's happening there?
All right, so picture this. The command center sees a rocket coming in, headed straight for a populated area. That information gets zapped over to the Tamir missile launcher, and boom, a Tamir is launched. It's guided by the data from the command center, homes in on that rocket, and then get this, it actually uses its own system to detonate, but not directly on the rocket. It explodes close enough to destroy the rocket, but far enough away that you minimize any damage on the ground.
So it's like a carefully calculated explosion, designed to neutralize the rocket, but keep everyone on the ground safe.
Exactly. It's all about minimizing damage as much as possible. When they first used Iron Dome back in 2011, it had something like a 75% success rate, which is already pretty amazing when you think about it. But they've been working on the technology, refining it, and today that success rate is over 90%. And those successes, they aren't just numbers on a screen. Each one represents lives saved, buildings protected. It's really remarkable.
90%, that's incredible. Considering what's at stake here, those numbers are pretty reassuring.
They really are. And that level of effectiveness is what's made Iron Dome a game changer. It's revolutionized how we think about defense technology.
When you think about it, it's kind of mind-blowing, right? This technology, I mean, it feels so futuristic, but they developed it so fast.
It really is an amazing accomplishment. And it really speaks to how focused everyone was on getting it done. Think about it. From when they decided to make Iron Dome back in 2005, it only took 6 years to make it operational. For something this complicated, that's lightning fast.
Especially when you're talking about a system that's literally there to protect people's lives. You have to wonder, though, were there any disagreements back then? While they were developing it? Because the articles mentioned that not everyone was on board with the project at first.
Oh, there were definitely disagreements. Plenty of them. Developing something like this, a whole new defense system, it's never simple. There were some pretty heated debates within the military and in the government, too, about whether Iron Dome was the right way to go. Some people thought it would be better to focus on being more offensive, taking the fight to the other side. And then there were others who thought different systems would be more effective.
I can see how the cost of the whole thing would be a big sticking point. I mean, you're using these high-tech Tamir missiles, and each one costs tens of thousands of dollars to take out these rockets that are, a few $100 each? Someone was definitely asking some tough questions about that.
Oh, absolutely. That whole cost-benefit analysis was a huge part of the discussion. Why spend so much to intercept something that's so much cheaper to make in the first place? There were even proposals for other kinds of systems. Like, did you know there was this idea for a laser-based system? It was called Nautilus, but they decided it just wasn't feasible, at least not at the time.
I bet if you're listening to this right now, you might be asking yourself the same question. Does it really make sense spending tens of thousands to stop something that maybe cost a few hundred?
It's a totally fair question. And it shows just how complicated it is to really figure out the value of a defense system. Sure, a single interception is expensive, but you can't just look at it that way. You have to think about what you're preventing. We're talking about saving lives, preventing injuries, protecting all those homes and buildings. You start adding all that up, the human cost, the financial cost, and suddenly the cost of a Tamir missile seems pretty small.
So it's not just about the immediate cost of firing that missile. It's about the much bigger cost that you're preventing by having the system in place.
Exactly. It's like having a safety net. You might not need it all the time, but when you do, you're really glad you have it. And that sense of security, that's huge. It lets you make smarter, more calculated decisions about how to handle these threats. If you know you have a good defense against these smaller, short-range attacks, it changes how you approach the whole situation.
It's amazing, really. Something designed to protect can have these ripple effects, influencing everything.
You got it. And that's something people forget a lot of the time when they talk about this kind of technology. It's not just about the hardware, the missiles and radar and all that. It's about how it all fits into a much bigger plan.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about how effective Iron Dome is,
Yeah.
and everything we've seen backs that up. But the articles did mention there are people out there who aren't convinced.
Right.
Some people even say the whole thing is a hoax.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you have something new, especially in a field like this, a defense technology, there are always going to be skeptics. And look, it's important to be realistic. No system is perfect. Iron Dome has limitations, just like anything else.
So how do we make sense of these two very different perspectives? We've got clear evidence of this system working, but we also have people saying it's all fake. What's the reality here?
That's a good question. For me, I think it comes down to trusting the evidence and listening to the people who know the most about this stuff. Yes, there are always going to be those dissenting voices, but if you look at the experts, the people in the defense community, and all the data they've collected over the years, the overwhelming majority agree that Iron Dome is effective. And to be fair, the Israeli military themselves, they've been pretty open about the fact that it's not perfect. But at the end of the day, its impact on their defense strategy and that sense of security it provides, I mean, you can't deny that.
It's amazing how, you read these articles and Iron Dome, it's not just about the technology, is it? It's all these other things mixed in, like politics, what the public thinks, even the personal stories of the people it's supposed to protect. There was this one article, I don't know if you remember this, it talked about how Iron Dome was actually deployed sooner than planned because of public and political pressure. Like they had to rush it out there, almost like a trial by fire.
That's a really interesting point. It goes to show you how real-life events can have a huge impact on how technology gets developed. I mean, in this case, there was this constant threat, so they needed to get the system up and running, ASAP, no time to waste. And it's funny, you might think that first deployment was because of rockets from Gaza, but it wasn't. It was actually rockets fired from Lebanon back in 2012, and they were aimed at Tel Aviv. That really shows you how adaptable Iron Dome is. They've used it in all kinds of situations, and it's worked against different threats.
Yeah, and speaking of adapting, I got to say, that story about the hacker who messed with Iron Dome, that really stuck with me. Might have only been for a little while, but still,
Yeah.
you think about a system this sophisticated, and it makes you realize that there are always going to be vulnerabilities no matter what.
Oh, absolutely. That story is a perfect example of how warfare is changing. I mean, we tend to think about it in terms of tanks and missiles, right?
Mhm.
But this whole cybersecurity thing, it's getting more and more important all the time. Think about it. Iron Dome, it relies on software, networks, data flowing back and forth. So yeah, you've got to defend against the obvious stuff. But then there's this whole invisible battlefield, the digital world.
It really makes you think. It hasn't even been that long, a little over 10 years, and Iron Dome has gone from this controversial idea, this big, expensive experiment, to this globally recognized symbol of, I don't know, technological achievement. It's pretty wild when you think about it.
It really is an amazing story, and it gets you thinking, right? I mean, there's no doubt Iron Dome has saved countless lives. It's given people a sense of security, and this is something for everyone to consider. Some experts argue that by protecting against the immediate effects of conflict, by lowering the stakes in a way, it could actually make achieving a lasting peace even harder.
That's kind of a paradox, isn't it? The thing that's meant to protect, actually making it more difficult to stop the fighting for good.
It is. By changing the equation, so to speak, by making the risks and rewards of conflict different for everyone involved, these technologies, like Iron Dome, they make a complicated situation even more complicated. Makes
Yeah.
you wonder, right? Does being good at defense, even though it's obviously necessary, does it sometimes stand in the way of finding a way to truly end the conflict? It's a question worth pondering.
Definitely. And it shows you that Iron Dome's impact goes way beyond just intercepting those rockets. It makes you think about the bigger picture, the unintended consequences of technology, and how incredibly complex this whole pursuit of peace and security really is.